Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick, Joe Sayward, and I had about the 2026 Hungarian Grand Prix. McLaren won. The tarmac had issues again, and Oscar Piastri lost his race and very nearly his cool to a blue flag battle with Carlos Sainz. Dick broke down just how narrow the setup window really is when temperature and track conditions shift underneath every team all weekend long. But the conversation that took over the back half of this episode wasn't about Hungary at all. Bahrain can't hold its own Grand Prix this year, so it's paying Malaysia to host it instead. Joe walked us through the money, the politics, and the precedent. As you'll hear, Joe and I landed in very different places. Before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If this show adds value to your F1 experience, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. Share this episode with other F1 fans. That's how people find us, and it's how we keep growing this community. Hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, gentlemen, our audience doesn't have any clue why we're already laughing, but hopefully it lets them know that we really enjoy getting to have this time talking with one another, and that, you know, we're just turning on the microphone after a bit of talking and they just get to listen in. Hence the reason I say listen in. We're chatting today about the Hungarian Grand Prix, and I am really looking forward to y'all's thoughts. So let's just get started with the race highlights. Dick, you want to get started?
Yeah, first of all, I thought this was a really fun race because the Hungaroring, because of its layout, is energy rich. And so you didn't see a whole lot of compromised laps from the drivers, you know, sitting there recharging their battery or whatever they needed to do. Instead, they just kind of went for it. And it was just fun to watch. And I thought it was a much more pure race. Speaking as a guy it's all about being a pure racer. And so I thought it was really fun. I thought Max sending it in turn one and passing 2 cars at one spot, that was brilliant. Even Max thought that it was a pretty nifty pass. It was just fun to watch that race. I really, really, truly enjoyed it. I thought Lando did a very good job. You know, they've got a car now that, as he describes it, he says it's still not very nice to drive, but at least it's fast. And so it was nice to see McLaren in a position to win, where you just kind of thought, yeah, these guys look pretty strong. Don't know what happened to Ferrari, really. They just never, like in the very last, in Q3, when they went out to make their last run, they just could not get it together. They could not improve and challenge for pole, which was really a surprise. And I don't know that there's ever been an explanation. Well, I never saw an explanation for it as to what happened. But anyway, just, you know, a series of random thoughts. But overall, I thought it was quite good fun to watch.
What about you, Joe?
Well, I thought it was a classic. The Hungaroring is like almost like Monaco, without the houses and without, to be honest, without the elevation changes. There's a little bit of up and down, but there's not a lot. And it's just very, very difficult to overtake. Watching the F3 and F2 races, they were wild because, you know, these guys know that they've got sort of one chance to get things done. You know, obviously after a safety car, you might be able to do it again, but they were completely wild because you know that that's kind of restrictions you have. So qualifying is really important. McLaren, I think the car very much suited the track. I don't think McLaren is really up there with the others. I think that Mercedes suffered because it was very hot. The track was a disaster. They'd re-tarmacked a whole bunch of it, done it very badly, and the FIA had passed it just as at Monaco. I don't get it. Don't understand. They're supposed to be professional track inspectors, and they're letting these things twice in 5 races or whatever it is. It ain't right. It ain't right. There's something they're not doing right. You know, tarmac is a science these days. It's been studied endlessly. You can make tarmac to do whatever job you want it to. Why can't they get it right? And that impacted qualifying certainly, um, and less so the race because they found some fix like gluing stuff to the track or whatever. But it was at the beginning, and the drivers were all over the place, and there were new bumps that had been created. It just wasn't very clever. Um, so and a race weekend like that, I think Kimi Antonelli really suffered from handing his car over on the Friday to Fred Vesti. I think that put him behind a long way. He caught up, but then in the end, it didn't work out. Um, but, I think he really suffered as a result of that. And Ferrari was, yeah, you're right, it was just a bit wishy-washy, really. Nothing particularly exciting to report. It's nice to see McLaren. I thought Oscar did a very good job too, and he got wildly and appallingly balked by Carlos Sainz, and basically lost not just his momentum, but his cool a little bit. To be fair, and making Oscar Piastri lose his cool is pretty difficult. Because he's as he says himself, he's almost horizontal when it comes to emotion. Nothing sort of gets him going, and Anyway, apart from that, further back, there was plenty of action. I thought the Racing Bulls were good again. Red Bull were okay. Max was Max as ever. I thought Audi did a very good job as well. And then you had the new Aston Martin, which was about where I expected it to be. Williams had a bad weekend, which made Aston Martin look good. But the Williams was absolutely not built for that racetrack. So I think it'll be, the difference between Hungaroring and Zandvoort and Monza is so massive that you have to take into account. You can't just rewrite the history books every week saying, now, look at this, McLaren's back on top. Let's wait and see. I think at Monza they'll be lapped probably. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing up, both of you have brought up some points that I wanted to definitely discuss with you, because what you just said about McLaren, that's the most recent thing you said. I had that question of, is this really a turnaround? And to hear you both, I'm wondering now, for those who are newer to the sport, they may have asked that question. What leads you? Is it the track itself, these experiences that you just said, that tells you, like, history wise, or is there something about what you saw the car's performance that makes you think that this isn't something where McLaren has now turned it all around?
No, it's always been more so in recent years when the levels of technology are so extreme, I suppose, and so close. Um, Circuit specificity, it's a very long and complicated word, isn't it? Um, is quite normal. In other words, one car will just do certain things better than others. Some do low speed cornering better than others. Some do high speed cornering better than others. So, and there are other things that weigh in. Not so much as it used to be in the old days when you had turbos and normally aspirated engines. There would be questions about altitude, for example, because that does a whole bunch of different things to engines and aerodynamics as well. Temperature is something which I think is almost a mystery to everybody. How do you make the tires work? Will your car work? Will it not work? And that seems to confuse drivers even between sessions. It'll suddenly change for no obvious reason, and it might be 2 degrees different. It's just a very, very complicated business. And if it was easy, we'd all be doing it. We'd all be being paid tons of money to understand how it all works, but we
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Dick, I wonder from your technical perspective, like in as a racer and your STEM background, would you like to jump in before we move on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Joe's point, the setup window is pretty narrow. I always find it really interesting where they talk about, some cars having a very, very narrow setup window. Well, all the cars have a narrow setup window. It's just that some are more narrow than others. And by that I mean you have a temperature change and your air density goes down. And if your air density goes down, that's going to impact your aero. It's going to impact the performance of your engine, all those kinds of things. And if you have changeable conditions, it's going to make a big difference in the way a car performs from session to session, let alone the whole weekend. And so a lot of it has to do with how well do your engineers react and all that. And I believe that right now, with the new regulations and all that, they don't have the database of knowledge that they would have had, say, at the end of last year, where they say, oh, it's a hotter day today. That means we have lost this many points of downforce. We need to make some adjustments before we even think about going out because we're going to be behind to start with, something like that. And so I think that's the other part of it. This is where the engineers really, really earn their money. The other part is that I don't know that there's any way to predict. Joe, you've probably heard them talking about it, but as the temperature goes up, the oil within the tarmac itself that is part of the
Yeah.
mixture that is made, right? It starts coming up. And so the track loses grip. And so the engineers have to ask themselves, okay, are we slower because we missed something on the setup, or are we slower just because the track is now slower?
You
Right.
can
And
you can actually see that with, if, for example, a cloud passes over the circuit, literally the difference between sunshine and a cloud can be, half a second a lap. And you just think, how does that work? But there are some other things happening, just to quickly add in there. We have in Formula One now a sort of onslaught of AI going on, which is very hard to follow, obviously, because they don't want to talk about it. And also, how does it work? A lot of people don't really understand AI yet, but a lot of these engineers do. So they can do all kinds of permutations and things that weren't doable or were doable in the past, but by armies of people. And now AI can do stuff like that. So we'll have to see what that impact is. But what it basically means is that everything just gets closer and more insane technically. Now, obviously, we're at the start of a new formula, so that does spread everybody out. But I think it won't be too long before people begin to close up. I'm not sure about Cadillac, but the rest of them, Cadillac's now back where it should be,
right.
as now that the Aston have actually produced a half decent car, but it's only a half decent car. It may have more development in it, but everybody is now more or less where they should be. I think that's the best way of putting it. Aston were completely out of sync with everybody, and that was disastrous, really.
Joe, I have a question for you, and just really curious. We know that both the Aston Martin and the Williams are just grossly overweight, right? I heard that for the Aston Martin, they were like 30 kilos over the minimum weight, and Williams may have be even more. And I find it fascinating that, and for our listeners, they may find this very interesting, but you really want to be quite a bit underweight with then putting in ballast into the car, and they move the ballast around front to rear, depending on the nature of the circuit. Um,
Oh yeah,
do you want to
absolutely.
expand on that and all that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, that's entirely right. I mean, every kilo overweight costs you time. The
Yep.
reason it costs you time is that, a car is heavier, has more momentum, goes around a corner and stresses the tires more, for example. I mean, there's lots of other explanations, but basically, moving a heavier object is more difficult than moving a light object. It's as simple as that. So
Right.
if you can then move the ballast around, which they do, they have ballast that goes in different places for different occasions. That helps them a lot. But to get to that is very difficult. And so, yeah, it's true. I think the Red Bulls have been pretty overweight too, and that's one of the reasons I think that they've been struggling. But now it's a matter of sort of crash dieting. Um,
Mhm.
we'll see, and there'll be a lot of lessons being learned too for next year too. So we could see a complete change in the driver in the pecking order
Hmm.
next year. There's no guarantees because everything is so new. That's
Yep.
I think you can pretty much guarantee that the Mercedes engine will still be up there, even if, according to the FIA, the Red Bull is the better engine. Um, you know,
Right. Go figure.
well, it isn't, but it probably is. The ICE is better by all
Right.
accounts, but the rest of it isn't. So, but it is very odd that whole the way they've handed out sort of upgrades to the engine people, but giving Red Bull nothing when it's clear that Red Bull needs to be upgraded a bit to be on the pace of Mercedes.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that may be Mercedes playing games. That's one thing that you can mention. They might have been not using their engine to the fullest extent in the start of the year because they knew that they might be able to gain some more.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that happens in this game. You have sandbagging, you have
Right.
it's a bit like the whole balance of performance rubbish that exists in the World Endurance Championship. Everyone's desperately trying to play the system so they get a better thing for what they need, and mainly what they need is to win at Le Mans. So they all pretend that it's terrible until you get to Le Mans, and suddenly the whole order changes. I mean, it's not my kind of motor racing, I have to say. I just
Hmm.
the whole thing's bent, and I don't like it. So there you are.
Yep.
Oh, the other thing is, in World Endurance Championship, there's actually a rule where competitors are not allowed to talk about this.
Oh,
How wrong is that?
well, yeah. How interesting. I had no idea.
Now, if you talk
Yeah.
about it, you get into trouble, you get penalized, you get penalties, you get fines, whatever.
Well, we wouldn't want the rabble speaking their minds.
Anyway, yeah, it's that kind of stuff. It just makes a mockery of what I call sport. It's a bit like reversing the top 10 in Formula 2 and Formula 3. What's the point?
Right.
What's the point? You just get some bloke winning a race who doesn't deserve to.
Hmm.
And yeah, particularly at a race like Monaco, well, you might as well just give the bloke the cup after qualifying. If he qualifies 10th, he's won. Basically,
That's
unless he
right.
screws it up. What is the
Congratulations. You won the
point?
lottery.
Yeah, what is the point? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so maybe it looks better on TV. It doesn't because they still at Monaco they just follow each other around. At some other races, the fast guys being behind the slower guys creates just usually another safety car, then another safety car, and another safety car. And of course, anyone sneezes, there's a safety car these days. So there's a lot wrong with all these sort of fiddles that go on. But we're supposed to be talking about Formula One, so let's get back to that, shall we?
Well, I want to go back to something you both said. I think you touched on, which is the incident between Carlos and Oscar, specifically the blue flags. Can we unpack a little bit about that? Because I know during the race, at least on the F1 TV, there was a lot of commentary. Post race, there was a lot of commentary. Help us understand, especially those of us who weren't watching 30 years ago. Were blue flags? What's the history of blue flags? Why were they implemented? What's the role of them? And so help people understand a little bit about how racing has changed over time.
Okay. Well, at the beginning of this is going to be a very short potted history of whole motor racing. At the beginning of motor racing, they raced from city to city. That was too dangerous because you go past one place over a 500-mile course and there's some peasant wandering by with a cart and gets flattened and everyone's dead. So then they went to big circuits. So the circuits were like 70 miles around, which is a similar problem, but gradually the circuit size came down, and that meant you were lapping people. And when you were lapping people, you wanted to warn the guys ahead that that there was a fast guy coming up behind them, so they didn't get in the way. And basically, that's where the blue flag came from. Now, nowadays, it's all to do with blue lights on the dash and all the rest of it. Technology has the drivers should know. In fact, in a really good team, they will warn the driver that such and such is coming up behind him.
Yep.
Particularly in qualifying, that's an issue. Like, get out of the way because Fred's on a fast lap. and you don't want a penalty if you're getting in his way. Now, in the race, that also should happen. But sometimes drivers are just bloody minded, you know. I remember back in the day, back in the 80s, there were a couple of, as they get older, drivers get grumpier. They don't like being overtaken, particularly if they've been winners in their day. And one of the worst was René Arnoux, a Frenchman, and he used to get in everybody's way all the time. And it was like, said, "Oh, come on, René, go away, leave the sport. If you're going to be like this, what's the point?" You know. But there were others too, and they were just. It's almost like they were doing it because they couldn't. They were fed up with being in a bad car. You know. And
Yeah.
maybe there's a little bit of Carlos in that too. I think Carlos is a good guy to a large extent, but I think there's a little bit of fireworks, if you like the blue touch paper. He can get quite irate, I think is the word.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there we are. So I mean, he got penalised for it, and he deserved to be penalised for it, but it did mess up Piastri's race really. And that shows you also, the extent to which there was one point, I think, where Lewis went slightly wide, and that was it. He was gone from the race, in terms of up the front, battling for the lead. That's how tight it is. And this is what I think new viewers don't necessarily understand, is just how, first of all, how on the edge they are all the time, and secondly, how tight it is and how a tiny little mistake puts you into, out of the toe or whatever. Puts you into dirty air. And it really is at such a level that the tiniest things really matter. And I think Hungary showed us that in a number of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Listening to what you just said. Oh, Dick, I don't want to cut you off if you wanted to chime in on the blue flags.
No. I was chuckling though when Joe brought up René Arnoux, because here's a Frenchman driving. At one stage, he was driving for Renault, and one of the U.S. commentators, who's actually a Brit, I love this guy, David Hobbs. He was a retired racing driver and was now the color commentator for the U.S. broadcast. Pretty sure old Habbo had a couple of glasses of wine before the race ever started. Guy was hilarious and still around, but he didn't call him René Arnoux. He called him Arnie Renault, and because he drove for Renault, and from now on, I can never call him René Arnoux. I always call him Arnie Renault automatically. So anyway, yeah, Habbo, man, what a guy. Great guy.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff with Hobbo over the years because he was doing, I think it was ESPN at that point. We must have done about 10 years of Grand Prix together, and he was just him and Chris Economaki and people like that. It was a wild time. And there were different rules in those days. You could misbehave a bit more, I think. I remember Hobbo standing there with his blazer and tie in the finest traditions. And it was Varsha, I suppose, would be the other guy, Bob Varsha.
Right.
And they wear the shirt and tie, and then there were shorts and sneakers, because that bit didn't appear on camera. And it was hot in a lot of these places, this kind of stuff. But for some reason, Americans like shirt and ties when they're commentating. I don't understand that either, but there you are. It's part of the traditions over there, I suppose. But yeah, Hobbs was an absolute scream.
Oh yeah. I guess he now lives. He had a BMW dealership.
He lives, I think, in Florida now. I haven't seen him for a while, but I'm pretty sure he's stateside. And he's certainly had a number of dealerships. I don't know if he's still got them. His son, I think, might be
doing it.
Family might be running something. I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of that in a number of racing drivers who sort of settled in the US. And sort of, I always get them mixed up as to which one's doing what.
Right. Well, he was is a larger than life character. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I really actually, Joe, I hope this is okay, but I have a number of items that you talked about in this week's JSBM that I'd love to have you go a little bit further. Dick, are you cool with that? Or do you feel like we talked about the race enough?
Yeah, I think we've done.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so Joe, first, you alerted everyone to the Malaysia, Bahrain Grand Prix. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know I used the names inverted. Why don't you give us the story?
Okay, well, it's a story of money. That's what it boils down to. Bahrain has lots of money. Malaysia has lots of money, but doesn't want to spend it on motor racing. Um, the reason Bahrain likes motor racing is it's good for the country. The Crown Prince is, who's also the Prime Minister, by the way, is is a huge racing fan, and he's also the owner of McLaren. So, or at least the country is the owner of McLaren through one of the many sovereign wealth funds. So
Right.
basically, they can't have a race in Bahrain this year because some Americans caused some trouble down there a while back, and everything's a mess, and it's not getting any better at the moment. In fact, if anything, it's spreading. So Bahrain was trying to get back in on October the 4th, which is a date between Baku in Azerbaijan and Singapore. Now, if you look at a map, you go from Baku to Bahrain to Singapore, it's doable. Formula One can do amazing things these days in terms of getting stuff moving around, but you can't go in and out of Bahrain because your missiles might arrive on your head. And nobody really wants that to happen. So basically, what Bahrain said is, okay, well, we'll pay for a race somewhere else, which is a novel idea. Why not? Malaysia has a decent track. We used to race there a lot. It's very hot, very sweaty place. And in the middle of the jungle, but officially it wasn't in the jungle. Officially it was in the sort of suburbs of Kuala Lumpur, but basically it was in the jungle near the airport. And they couldn't afford it. They didn't get big enough crowds. And when the Singapore Grand Prix came along, there was really a sort of movement to get rid of Malaysia. At the same time, the Malaysian government went into a sort of corruption mode for a period, and that's not something that that Liberty Media was particularly interested in. So at the end of the day, the Malaysian Grand Prix got dropped. I have a nasty suspicion that the Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia will be the first. I can see a Saudi Arabian Grand Prix taking place in Imola, and I can see, an Abu Dhabi Grand Prix taking place in Imola, and I think quite likely to see a Qatar Grand Prix taking place in Portugal. Am I in favour of that? Not really, because I don't like the concept of rich nations being able to just turn up and have a Grand Prix. Grand Prix racing is a little bit about nations and about each one being a big national event as opposed to renting the space elsewhere. Having said that, in the history of the sport, we had a Swiss Grand Prix, and motor racing is banned in Switzerland. We had a Swiss Grand Prix in 1982 in Dijon, which is, I haven't actually measured how far from the border it is, but it's not too far away. We had Luxembourg Grand Prix in Germany because at that time it was Michael Schumacher's era, and they wanted to have more than one race in each country. Now they invented this thing, a European Grand Prix title, to get around that. But I can't remember the details exactly, but for some reason or other, they had to use Luxembourg for Nürburgring, which they did twice. And the other one, there is a third one. What was that? Oh, yes, of course. The San Marino Grand Prix was never held in San Marino, ever. And that was on the Formula One calendar for many years. It's about 70 miles from San Marino. And San Marino is basically a big rock that someone left off a map once, and they ended up as an independent country. And it's got some tax benefits. Kimi Antonelli actually lives in San Marino because it's fiscally beneficial to do so. But so there is a sort of a history of it, and that was basically a sop to Ferrari, so you could always have two Italian Grand Prix every year. And that's sort of gone away now because basically Monaco is fundamentally a half an Italian Grand Prix, half a French Grand Prix as well. So, it's not, I think it's good to have each nation having their own Grand Prix, but in this circumstance, there's a war going on. Bahrain's willing to pay. Yeah, okay. But it's odd. I mean, if you're a fan and if you're a kid and you don't know geography much, trying to get someone explaining to you that Bahrain's not in Malaysia is going to be a bit fun, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It mangles geography.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Because I have thoughts, but I want to first make sure I'm educating myself a little bit. And you have such great insights because of your access. How does this type of conversation even start, do you think, or no? Is this facilitated by Formula One, by Liberty, bringing together these two governments, these two entities, like the race promoters? How does that happen?
Now, well, the Bahrain Grand Prix is promoted by the state of Bahrain, so through a number of companies. So basically, it's the government. Malaysia is a government-owned circuit. So basically, in the press release that they put out, it said that the governments had worked together to achieve this. I'm sure they had. I'm sure they had. Whose idea was it? Probably. I would think that the Crown Prince of Bahrain, who's a very clever bloke, might have rung up Stefano Domenicali and said, "What about holding a Bahrain Grand Prix somewhere else?" Now, it might be the other way around. I don't know that particular case, but because you have to also look at the impact if a Grand Prix doesn't happen. So a Bahrain Grand Prix probably brings Formula One about $100 million with all the things that it generates around it. Okay, it's a lot of money. You've got the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that dropped out as well this year, and the chances are we're not going to get anything in Abu Dhabi or in where am I missing? My brain's gone.
Qatar.
Qatar, yes, exactly. Sorry, I was thinking, I had an O stuck in my head. It was Doha, but I don't know. Anyway, in Qatar. So basically, we've got 4 races. Now, if you add them all up and you say, well, that's 400 million loss of revenue to Formula One, that's a big pile of money. What happens to that money? It gets divided by 2, a little bit, slightly, not quite exactly 2. But basically, Formula One keeps some, the FIA gets some, and the teams get the rest of it divided between them. So you're talking about the teams. Let's just do that. 11 teams, let's just say 200 million divided by 11. That's a pile of money. And so the teams stand to lose that money if these races don't happen. So they will do anything, because some of these teams don't make big profits. Some do make big profits and others will make big profits one day, but they're not doing so now. So this is quite important, because if you've budgeted for X amount and you're 20 million short because there's 4 races disappeared, that's a serious problem. So I think altogether, everyone is sort of going, well, we need to have a race. We'll go wherever we have to go. And that's pretty much what's happening. But we haven't had this, this happened during COVID as well, remember? Yep. The difference there being that not all the promoters paid the money up front. A lot of them did it, a lot of them, there were races that came in like Portugal and Turkey who couldn't afford to pay at normal rates, but they came in because the opportunity was there. And they could do a race that wasn't difficult for everyone to get to with COVID restrictions, etc. So, but having the races means your TV contracts are safe if you have enough of them. It means that your trackside sponsorship, your all these deals that you have can all happen to a lesser greater extent. So you're going to lose some money, and they did. They all lost money in COVID. But if you look at McLaren, you can see that they had to sell a whole bunch of stuff and do a whole bunch of things to keep the team alive. It was tough, and so now the long-term goal is to have 11 teams that are all wealthy, that all make about the same kind of level of commitment and about the same kind of level of performance. We're sort of halfway through that process that was started by Chase Carey, and basically we've got much stronger teams now. We haven't got any teams looking like they're going to go out of business because they get more prize money. And they are restricting what they can spend on because of budget capping, which is a work of genius. I mean, Chase Carey was an extraordinary bloke because these guys never agreed on anything. If you said, oh, it's a nice day today, isn't it? Some would argue it was Wednesday, and some would be arguing it's Tuesday. That was Formula One before Chase came along, and he just banged their heads together until they finally agreed. They agreed to get rich.
Hmm.
How dumb is that? Um, Now the FIA is there, just sort of with its begging bowl out all the time, offering services it's supposed to be doing for a large amount of money, fees for this, fees for that, all the rest of it, and then they have big parties and and they have conventions in about road safety and stuff that really has no impact on Formula One at all. But that's they got nice blazers that the FIA president gave them, which they can wear, which is probably a big thing in Burundi or somewhere in Africa. I got my FIA blazer, but I don't see what value if they don't do the job properly. I don't see what value the FIA brings to the sport. They seem to think they own it, which legally speaking they did at some point, but a long-term lease is like 100-year lease of the commercial agreements is like virtual ownership because
Hmm.
you know it basically amounts to ownership. It's not, but when it comes to renewing that lease in 75 years time, you'll get nothing for it if you don't offer something that people want, and the FIA can't survive without Formula One. Cannot survive. Dick.
Yeah, a question for you, Joe. What is the impact of a team sponsor or somebody who you come up to them and say, "Hey, guess what? We're not going to actually be in Bahrain. I know you had a bunch of people planned to be there as your guests, but we're going to host them in Malaysia instead." I mean, what does that impact do? I
it's
mean, I can
collateral
see,
it's collateral damage.
yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it. It's just, I mean, there was a very good case in this year in Saudi Arabia where they had a lot of guests and everything planned for. None of it could happen. So,
Hmm.
what do? You put them all on a plane and send them to Malaysia if that's what they want to go to or not. Is there a loss of impact? Yeah, sure. Your motivations will change. The people you might want to invite will probably change as well.
Hmm.
Um, And so, yeah, a lot of rethinking has to be done. But then again, this is why Formula One is often genius because they can just adapt and get it done.
Hmm.
And and they have to make a decision fairly soon about the last two races of the year, as well as
Right.
Qatar, Abu Dhabi. It ain't going to happen if things are still flying around. I mean,
Sure.
the other day I noticed that the Houthis had sent missiles either side of Jeddah.
Yeah.
Boom. So you need to start worrying about the Dakar Rally, the World Endurance Champion that's already gone. The World Rally Championship has a round scheduled to be around in Saudi
Correct.
Arabia. There's a whole bunch of things that will be impacted by this war, and that impacts on everybody. And basically, it means people lose money. So. The other impact I'd say is that the Bahrain Grand Prix being in Malaysia, there's a bunch of time zones in the way there. There's
Oh, yeah.
3,700 miles between the two places, so the time zones will be different, and so the viewing times will be different. It'll be harder to watch it in the US, I think, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Bahrain is usually an evening race, sort of 7 o'clock at night, which translates into pretty early in the morning in the US, I think. And it'll get more complicated if it moves to Malaysia, which is, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 hours different. I'd have to look it up, but
Yep.
but basically they're just minimizing the damage as much as they can. And there are
Hmm.
going to be some things that don't work for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason I asked and wanted to really have this conversation is because one, I've seen so many people, especially in the socials, making very odd comments or just kind of finding it comical. But looking at it from a business perspective or even from a legal's perspective, I thought it was a kind of a stroke of genius to do this. I know I hear you, Joe. And I think in my mind, the analysis I did was look, this is two different frameworks. One is a force majeure event, and how are you mitigating the damage? this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because you gave a great analysis as to the things that had to be considered and had to be weighed in to figure out what are some possible solutions. Because the worst solution is a complete cancellation of the race. And one time, we've already had that recently with Imola, with the flooding, that was at a different time in the reg cycle. And when you talk about the financial impact, what I wrote down in my notes as you were talking is to lose every dollar we're talking about under the cost cap era in the early part of a reg cycle, it will have a cascading effect financially and technologically. All already complaining, or at least I am, about where the regs are. If they lose that money even more, how long does that delay and impact what we want to see as the positives as they refine and optimize the rules and adjust? So that's just looking at it from a force majeure. And the reason why I asked the question of like who all was involved, because I wanted to understand like the stakeholders and the people that were involved in making this decision. Because when I read this, I thought, if this does become a new form of business, a new business model, like you just said, Chase Carey, such a genius. I actually thought, in a world where it feels like so many countries are divided, the World Cup is a great example of people coming together around sport and changing their perceptions. And I think Formula One does that on a yearly basis, consistently bringing people together. But if we got governmental entities or businesses even more inside the sport collaborating like this, could that actually be another form of soft diplomacy? You have other financial joint ventures in that way. I don't know if that's positive. I see your perspective of wealthy countries coming in to not so wealthy countries and impacting them. But I thought, wow, this is a very interesting possibility.
Formula One won't. Formula One won't argue against it if there's more money in it.
Right. And I don't have a problem with that.
I kind of have a problem with it. Let's just say China. They want to have two Grand Prix and they can't have two Grand Prix because Formula One doesn't want to have two Grand Prix in China, whatever the reason, you know. Or South Africa wants to have a Grand Prix. They've got a circuit that could just about make it, but they haven't got the money. So what happens if the Chinese, want a Grand Prix in South Africa? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think it confuses the fans. I think that fans are used to the fact that a Grand Prix is one of the big events in the sporting calendar of a nation. And to have them suddenly leaping around all over the world with different titles of different countries doesn't work for me. I think that just makes it very confusing. It's not I don't know. I mean, what's the goal of sport? Is the goal of sport to make as much money as possible, which is where Formula One is at the moment, I suppose? Or is it to, it goes back a little bit to that conversation we were having before about Formula 2 and Formula 3. If you make it, they want more sprint races now because that gives bigger numbers, therefore they get more money. If do they want to reverse the grids next? I would hate that in Formula One. And at the moment, I think, luckily, Stefano hates it too. But, is it being driven just by money, or do we have to hang on to some traditions?
Well, I mean, I guess I look at it and I think if it's only driven by money, I probably have a problem with it. If it's a primary or a majority driver, then I'm okay with it because in some ways, again, not having sat here and thought through everything, but after listening to your insight, I see it as the problem where people say, why are there 3 races in America? Why do we, as a proud American who loves all the races, why do we get 3 and other countries don't? It's because we have the financial capacity and the market interest that people are choosing here. If it could drive people to South Africa, to isn't it Kyalami? That's the old race track there.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
the Americans were willing to work with them to help bring in the infrastructure, the support, and even the tourism that comes, and that could have a practical benefit to the South African community and the motorsport culture there, do we not then move forward racing and the industry? Those are some of the questions I guess I'm thinking through.
I know what you're saying.
It's maybe too Pollyannish and too positive, but I mean, I guess I'm seeing it as could this be something that actually brings people to a different way of engaging? Like even the World Cup, we had technically, it was here in the North America. Everyone thought about most of the matches happening here in the United States, but some matches were happening in Mexico and Canada. That had to have positive effect of bringing tourism and bringing those.
I think if we look, for example, a very good example is Rwanda. Rwanda is being largely funded from Qatar, the race that will happen in Rwanda. It's Qatari money because the Qataris want to build an aviation hub for Africa next door to the circuit. This is to promote Rwanda, etc., etc. It's mainly that kind of money. If you look at the Brazilian Grand Prix, there's an awful lot of Abu Dhabi money in there. So it's already happening, but changing the names of the races is slightly different, and I think that's where I have an objection to it. Not every single time. I think in an emergency, yes, but I wouldn't like to see it becoming the norm,
So I guess I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding. So the fact that the money is happening isn't the issue for you. It's more the name. And I guess I'm saying is if the money's already happening, then why not use the name and leverage it that way? It's a new thing to sell. I thought your other item in the JSBM that actually kind of ties into this, I'll make that clear. You talked about Patrick McNally, how he progressed the sport because he saw a place where sponsorship and if anything, you can talk about it. But I guess that's what maybe made me think this isn't terrible idea of if the outside of a force majeure event, if this becomes a new thing. My personal opinion based off this knowledge right now, I reserve the right to change my thoughts later down the road. So, okay, Joe, go ahead. Tell us a little about Patrick because it was such a beautiful tribute that you wrote inside of there.
Thank you. That's nice. Paddy, as he was known, Paddy was he was a weirdly, he had the same job as me when he started out. He was an Autosport Grand Prix reporter, and he went off to get involved in the commercial side of the business at a time when sponsorship was just beginning. So he was obviously mixed up with Marlboro in the early years. And then he began to see other potentials. There's a whole bunch of things that Bernie didn't want to do. He wasn't interested in merchandising. I once said to Bernie, look at all the money they're making in America on merchandising. Why aren't you doing it? And he looked at me and he went, I'm not a T-shirt salesman. And I was like, Bernie, that's fine, but you're making it, a whole bunch of money's leaving that you're not grabbing. He wasn't interested in that. He wasn't interested in giving people VIP hospitality, which is top of the range globally. There's nothing beats the Paddock Club in terms of quality. The trackside signage, what a mess that used to be. If you look at old film of Grand Prix, there were 1,000 little stickers all over the place. Paddy came in and it used to be 12 signs and a bridge, and that was £1 million. Thanks very much. Ching, take the money. And you make it exclusive because you cut down the number of sponsors, you raise the prices, and you make the whole thing look professional. So Paddy had this way of making things look professional, and he developed them all. He did all kinds of other things. He made the programs. He did all the stuff Bernie didn't like doing. He did the podiums. Formula One podiums used to be a right old mess, but Paddy made them look good. And Bernie and Paddy, their relationship was quite an interesting one. A lot of people think that Paddy was Bernie's flunky, but I don't think he was. I think that Paddy was paying for the rights that he was developing, and Bernie was taking it for basically doing nothing except to agree, I'll take the money, And Bernie likes deals like that, believe me.
Who wouldn't?
but what Paddy was doing was ahead of the world of sport. There were lots of sports who stole the Paddock Club idea from Formula One later on. And so I think Paddy deserves a lot more credit than he was given. In the end, he sold out for a vast sum of money. And he's a classy guy. He bought massive stately homes in England and did them up properly, how they used to be, and stuff like that. And so I had a lot of time for Paddy. He didn't have much time for journalists, but he did, weirdly, he didn't mind me for some reason. So we always got on very well together. I actually went to him once and tried to get the contract to create the programs with his organization. And he took me out to lunch and he said, "You don't want this deal." And I went, "What?" He said, "You don't want to do this. It's just a waste of energy. You won't make much money out of it. Just do something else. Don't do this." And in the end, he flogged it to somebody else, But I think it was because I was a small operator trying to become a bigger operator or whatever. And he just said, "Don't do it. It's not in your interest." So I had a soft spot for Paddy. He was also, incidentally, one of the most loyal JSBM readers.
I believe that. I believe that, especially when you tell us about the longevity of your friendship and professional careers. I think it's great. I have to say, I really have enjoyed this and appreciate the fact that you guys have made time for this. And if anything, I look forward to our next conversation, gentlemen.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well.
Okay, friends, what did you think of our conversation? Drop me a line via email, sabrina@2guysaGirlandF1.com. Can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. And with that, let me say, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in, because we're just 2 guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.